Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and a very good morning to you. Today, inshallah, we will continue what we started last time about Islamic civilization. From time to time, we will watch certain documentaries on the inventions, on the contributions of Muslim scientists and scholars throughout the history. But the main point which we have to focus on is the early beginning of the Islamic civilization. And in order to focus on this, we need to look at the situation in Arabian Peninsula, in the entire world, at that time, before the message of the Qur'an. What was happening there? As we said before, social customs and traditions held sway over the Arab minds, and actually it restrained its ability to move in a forward direction. People, even if they try to do something else rather than what their forefathers did before, they still feel that they have to be connected to their own culture, to their own tradition, to the extent that the Qur'an, as we mentioned last time, is forbidding mimicry without knowledge, analysis, or guidance in many verses. And all these verses, by the way, revealed within that period, the early period in Mecca. Why? Because at that time, as we said, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he started to approach his people of Mecca. People in Mecca in particular were suffering from so many social diseases. One of the most noticed diseases at that time, social customs and traditions. There is no harm in following social customs if those customs are not contradicting the main idea which people should focus on, which the Qur'an was calling people to use. Qur'an was calling people to use their mind, to use their abilities. But if people stop thinking and stop using their mental capabilities and just follow blindly what their forefathers mentioned or did, then there is a big problem here. The Qur'an, as we mentioned last time, in many ayat, many verses, especially those, as I said, revealed in Mecca at the beginning of the core of Islam, talking about this disease in particular, focusing on the problem. One of the biggest achievements of the Quran at that time is to let people learn how can they solve their own problems. As I said, one of their biggest problems, using of mind. This is a problem. People at that time did not actually use their minds as they supposed to. The Quran mentioned in one example in Surah Al-Baqarah, the verse 170, that when the Quran, when Allah is telling them, when God is telling them to try to understand and to look at the revelation, to look at the message revealed to those people, to look at the faith which has been revealed by Allah to the Prophet, peace be upon him. Just at least to listen to what the Prophet is telling them, to see whether this call is worth to follow or not. They would say, the first answer, we shall follow only that which we found our forefathers believing in and doing. Why? Even if their forefathers did not use their reason at all and were devoid of all guidance, this is a problem. And let us focus here. In this ayah, we see the end of the ayah, it's as a questioning. A questioning in the Quran is very important. In many verses in the Quran, we see question. We see the Quran is questioning people, trying actually to help people to start using their mind. From that point, questioning, trying to analyze, trying to think, trying to contemplate all these activities, mental activities, simply means the Qur'an founded what we call today a scientific methodology. Scientific methodology. Now, this is the real contribution, as I said. Inventions or other things which have been actually contributed later on by Muslim scholars, yes, of course, we can't just forget about them. They are very important. And actually, the Muslim civilization was passing through its golden time and started to act and give a real support to all other coming civilization later on. But still, if we would like to see what is the real contribution of the Islamic civilization, we look at this, the foundation of a scientific methodology. How thinking results should be based on proof, logic, and evidence that presents, of course, facts without imposing them on others. As I said, the Qur'an from the early beginning is respecting the human mind, respecting the choices of the human mind. Even if these choices or some of these choices were totally wrong or against what the Qur'an is calling for, it's okay in the sense that the Qur'an itself, Allah is giving humanity the choice, the freedom of choice, the freedom to enjoy and to make up their minds. So within that context, we understand that there is no force and it's supposed to be, or what's supposed to be used when it comes to the activity of thinking. Thinking should be developed within freedom of choice. And that's what the Qur'an was calling for. So here the Qur'an is asking in many verses in the Qur'an, the non-believers, those who do not believe at all in the Qur'an, do not believe in the existence of God, do not believe in anything else. So the Qur'an asking the non-believers to demonstrate their evidence for worshipping gods other than Allah. Scholars from that point say this demand is intended to demonstrate the falsity of their arguments. In order, the Qur'an is challenging them now. In order to show that their argument is false, Qur'an is not telling them that, oh, you don't know anything, this argument is false. No, Qur'an is respecting their choices, telling them, okay, you say there is more than one God within this universe, more than one God who is controlling and taking care of everything in this entire world? Fine. Show me your proof. Show me your argument. Show me your evidence. If you can't give any evidence to prove this, then definitely your argument is false. So the Holy Qur'an is telling us from that perspective that the truth should be based on facts, not on illusions, not on what their fathers said, not on certain traditions, inherited traditions or customs. No, truth is truth, should be based on facts. And in order to consider anything as a fact, you need to show proof or evidence. Islam announced from that beginning, as we keep saying, the real achievement of the Islamic civilization is not what Muslim scientists actually contributed later on. No, it's from the early beginning, because the foundation of the Islamic civilization was not easy at all. It was not an easy task to be done within that world, not only Arabia, by the way. Islam announced a fight against ignorance and affirmed the importance of education, reflection, and wisdom. And let us focus here education within that atmosphere, within that environment, which when we read about Arabia, we realize that it was quite far from education or knowledge. Yes, there were certain attempts, certain efforts by some of the famous Arabs at that time, but still can't be considered as something general. The general condition in Arabia and even outside Arabia to some extent was totally far from education and knowledge. So within that environment, challenging environment, Qur'an started to develop the ability for the people to be educated. Why education? Because education is supposed to help people and to promote using their mental capabilities, telling them how to think positively, logically, how to be close to logic, how to be close to science. And this is the beginning. And by the way, this actually activity was continuous theme throughout the 23 or the 25 years over which the Quran was revealed. By all measures, starting the holy revelation with the word read has very special significance, as we said. Read was not just to read as we may imagine. No, start to develop their mental abilities, calling for people to use their mind, calling for people to think, to ask. So from the first word read, and as I said before, it's very interesting when you look at it. I mean, we talk about Islam as a religion, and we all know that Islam is a religion. So as a religion, it's supposed to reveal, the first word can be worship, can be have faith, can be believe in your God, believe in Allah, believe in the existence of Allah. But unlike all these words, the first word revealed to the Prophet and to humanity, of course, was read. So the Quran established a new model for the human consciousness, one which realized that the human role on earth is to develop and to make use of its resources in doing what? In building societies and civilizations from the early beginning. And here we can see the relation and the interrelation between individual and society. Why? Because the discourse of the Quran was calling to whom? Was calling everyone, was calling individuals, societies, nations to develop their abilities. So everybody, every individual, every society, every nation is responsible for this task, for trying to uphold and to achieve this task. And considered, of course, considering that this task is part, a very important part, and the cornerstone of Islam as a religion, which means that Muslims, in order to be close to God, in order to be close to Allah, they need to work on themselves, on their own abilities, be more educated, be more open-minded, be more logical, be more using your own mental capabilities. Try to reach and to answer and to reflect and to gain wisdom and to learn. That's why, as I said, the activity and the process of learning and teaching within the Muslim society is considered one of the highest levels of worship or ibadah in Islam. Why? It's not just because the position of knowledge or ilm in Islam as a religion. No, many verses in the Quran, many sayings of the Prophet, peace be upon him, talking about the position of science, of knowledge. But what is really important here, that people should be involved within the act of learning and teaching others at the same time. So there is no limit for knowledge at all. At any age, at any time, at any environment, people should be involved in learning and teaching others all the time. This is the highest level of worship or ibadah, as I said. So here we can summarize some of the main points about the most prominent cognitive contributions of Islam, not only to Islamic civilization, no, to human civilization. The first and the most important point, the Holy Qur'an argues human beings to use, develop, and operate their various mental and sensory capabilities, and reapproaches those who paralyze these capabilities and do not utilize their gifts. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah Almighty said, many ayat, many verses in the Quran, but one of them in this chapter Al-Hajj, and you can imagine Al-Hajj is a worship, Al-Hajj is a ibadah Muslims perform once in their lifetime. But even though within that chapter the Quran again is focusing on the real message, on the real call of the Quran, what is it? Have they then never journeyed about the earth, letting their hearts gain wisdom, causing their ears to hear? Yet, verily, it's not their eyes that have become blind, but blind have become the hearts that are in their breasts. Why the Quran is talking about this? Why Quran is blaming those who do not use and utilize their mental capabilities? Because all these capabilities are just gifts by Allah Almighty. And those gifts, which they really make a human being different from any other creature in the world. We have many creatures. They have eyes, they have ears, they have etc., etc. But even those animals, when they have all these things and capabilities, they have it to use it in their own life, according to what God is of course giving them as abilities, not anything else. But when it comes to humanity, when it comes to human being, a human being is different. Why? Because they're supposed to use their eyes, their ears, all these senses in order to achieve, to reach certain task, to develop their abilities, to think, to develop their abilities, to deduce certain ideas, to deduce certain decisions in their life. So if they don't use all these abilities and they just forget about it and use it in whatever they do for eating or for having fun or entertainment and forgetting about the real task, then definitely this is a problem. That's why the Quran is keep on blaming those who do not use those abilities. The topic of reflection, this is another point. The topic of reflection in the Quran is discussed in the Quran in many verses and many chapters. Not only chapters which have been revealed in Mecca, the early beginning of the call of Islam. No, throughout the Quran we see the topic of reflection directly in 19 locations in direct way, and in other indirect ways we have many locations in the Quran, many verses in the Quran talking about the act of reflection. Why this actually signifies, of course, how the call in the Quran is started to develop people and to develop the mental ability to ponder signs and indications, to view similarities and differences, meanings and possibilities, to arrive at conclusions, to arrive at certain decisions. People, when they start to ponder signs, of example, and indications in this universe, look, hear, think, ask certain questions, certain bigger questions like, why God is creating this universe, why everything in this universe is going according to certain system. It's so systematic, so organized, amazingly organized. Why? Definitely there is a goal, there is a purpose behind everything. So in order to understand the purpose, you need to think, you need to see, you need to look, you need to analyze. And that's what the Qur'an is telling humanity to do all over the time. And of course, I mentioned previously that many books in the Qur'an, in our Muslim library, many books written by scholars about the reflection and thinking and the position of reflection in the Quran. You can and I refer you to some of these books. The Holy Quran decrees that we stimulate our minds and utilize our full capabilities all the time, in all situations and by all means. It also, the Quran decrees that we develop the skills of what we call it empirical research. Now imagine, now you can connect what we are talking about here, the foundation of Islamic civilization, and what Muslim scholars later on develop. Why those scholars started to contribute a lot to the civilization, to human civilization. As you can see, Quran is developing skills of empirical research, establish the scientific Muslim mindset which considers contemplation of the universe and the human self as a religious duty. This is one of the biggest achievements of the Islamic civilization. Contemplation, thinking is one of the highest levels of ibadah. Contemplation of the universe, not for the sake of contemplation and then you stop. No, because when you act, you do something, then you have to go forward. You have to go further and to ask yourself, okay, then what? I contemplated. Okay, what is next? What is this going to lead me to what? What am I going to do after that? So when people start to contemplate of the universe and the human self, and they consider this as ibadah, definitely they will be closer to whom? To Allah Almighty. That is what the Quran is focusing on from the early beginning. Imagine now. That's why one of the Italian Orientalists, Laura, said, thanks to Islam, all forms of paganism were vanquished and people's perceptions about universe and religion were liberated from all deformation. Why? Because it was there. Paganism is just an act of ignorance, act which shows that people, they did not even have the ability to think. Laura, she even went further when she started to analyze what was happening and what was happening in Arabia at that time, because people, they did not actually started to think about why they are worshipping these stones. They just feel that, okay, we should do it. And she even explained the dialogue between the prophet, the messenger of God, Abraham, peace be upon him, with his people. When he was starting dialogue and about the worship of stones and idols, he asked him simply, okay, do you think, because after, of course, he destroyed all these idols, people came to him and asked him, oh Abraham, why did you do that? And then he stopped and he said to them, why don't you just go to that idol, the biggest one of them, and ask him, who did that? And then they started to think for a minute. Then they came back to Abraham, peace be upon him, and said to him, you know that they are not talking, they are unable to talk, they are unable to defend themselves as well. So we people, who believe in them, we need to protect them. And then Abraham said to them, "O people, so you believe in someone and you ask for his own protection to protect you and to defend you against your enemies in wars, etc., etc. And you are saying now that all these idols, they can't protect themselves. They need your protection. So what is the use? What is the point then?" And then they thought for a second. Then they said, "Yes, definitely you are right and we are very wrong. How come? How come we defend those idols and protect them, and then we ask them for a protection?" And then they came back to themselves and they said, "Oh no, but we have to keep our faith and we have to uphold to this faith, because this is what our fathers and forefathers were telling us. They worship these idols and we have to follow them." You see, here again we see someone who is actually believing in something which he realizes, if he thinks that it's useless and they should not do such thing. You see the point here? So no longer human beings humiliates himself except in front of his great creator. His will is freed from all restraints, and his soul is liberated from all middlemen and brokers of salvation. Meditation between a human being and Allah becomes invalid, and a human is no longer linked to any other human except through the normal relationship between two equal free men. You see the point here? Here, at that moment, at this historical point, we see humanity starting to liberate themselves. How? The concept of Tawheed, the concept of monotheism, the concept of believing in God. When you need something, you just go and ask Him directly. You don't need to have middlemen to convey your message or your dua or your call or your request or whatever it is. All you need is to establish a good relationship between you and God. And here at that moment in particular, you are freeing your soul from anyone. You are freeing your mental abilities from following people blindly without giving yourself chance to think and to realize what is right or what is wrong. Again, the Holy Qur'an laid the foundation for the relationship between humans and the universe. The humans and the universe. It's a relationship of joint performance in accordance to the will of Allah, developing the earth, worshipping Him in His universe. If this relationship is flawed, human civilization is disrupted. The extent of the disruption is directly proportional to the degree of deviation to this relationship. That's for sure. So Muslims at that moment started to realize that they have to protect the universe and the environment from that point of view. Why? Because this universe is supposed to be developed, to be protected, and to be added to the prosperity of humanity as well at the same time, to serve the humanity, to serve their society, to serve the community, to establish, to build, to beautify things around you. And all these acts considered as worship or ibadah or being more closer to Allah. So the Lord's decree to develop the earth is intended for all human beings, regardless of faith or culture. It's not for Muslims only. It can't be said like that. Why? Everything, all resources in this entire universe can be used by anyone. Why? Because even Muslims, non-Muslims, believers, non-believers, Everybody are created by God. And God, Allah, is the one who provided them with all these resources. So the entire universe was actually made subservient to all mankind with no exceptions, in order to enable man to fulfill this responsibility. All mankind is given equal opportunity to compete in this great mission. So everyone has equal opportunity. Some people, they take the best out of that, and they do the best out of these resources. Some people, they don't even use it. Some people, they just don't think at all about these resources, and they just use whatever help them in living their own life. Some people, no, use it and serve humanity at the same time. This is one of the verses mentioned in Qur'an, in Surah or chapter Al-Isra. The seven heavens extol his limitless glory, and the earth and all that they contain. And there is not a single thing but extols his limitless glory and praise. But you, O men, fail to grasp the manner of their glorifying him. Why? This is the creation of God. This is the creation of God. All these things created by God to do what? To glorify him, because he's the one who created. He's the one who is providing. But those who do not see now the Qur'an, how the Qur'an is tackling and discussing the problem of not believing in God. Not by imposing, not by forcing people to believe in the existence of God or in the oneness of God. No. By giving them, showing them, asking them, look at the universe. See how everything around you is going into certain system. Why? They are all following what their Creator is commanding them to do. And that's exactly what the Quran is telling them here. The Holy Quran emphasizes the importance of using the senses in observing. Observation is one of the most important tools used by Muslim scientists and scholars. Without observation, as we all know, even today, when it comes to the scientific methods, scientific methodology, you need observation. So the Quran emphasizes the importance of using the senses in observing, exploring the earth. Utilizing the senses allows one to respond, to stimulate, and to adapt to the fullest extent with the laws of nature and the rule of God as well. So again, we see here that all these senses given by God as a gift is not just to use them in certain things, in eating and entertainment and that's it. No, to think, to observe, to deduce, to add, to explore, to go further. That's why, as we mentioned, the contribution, the real contributions of Islamic civilization can't be just limited to those great inventions of Muslim scholars. No, it should be focused on the early beginning, the foundation of the Islamic civilization. And as we said, yes, we see all these inventions in different fields of knowledge, and we just so many times we feel really surprised how those scholars and Muslim scientists developed all these things within, we may say, quite short time. It's because they actually looked at all these activities as part of their role on this earth, as part of their belief, part of their faith and relationship with God. See you next time, inshallah. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.